Hey, good afternoon. It's Dave from Phoenix Fruit Farm. And today I want to make a little short video about some of my winter projects, things I do here to take up the time while we're waiting for spring. So anyway, I have a real problem with these Stanley hand planes, cast iron hand planes. I really like them. So what I want to do is show you what I do with them when I get one that's in the condition this one's in, which is not very good. It's missing a lot of stuff off it. So anyway, a lot of the finish and stuff's gone. So what I do, I generally tear them down and refurbish them, repaint if they need repainting, and strip them and redo the handles and all of that. So anyway, first I want to give you a little history of planes, hand planes, and what they were used for and things like that. So this is like their basic plane. This one cost, I think, $2.50. In 1906, it cost $2.50. But, of course, in 1906, a dollar was worth, in today's dollars, about $33. So it would have cost basically it was over a $60 plane. And Stanley also made a lot of planes for different companies. They private labeled them. You see, this one is a Winchester. This is a number 4 Winchester. And Winchester was, was a big name. It was very popular in the collectibles, I guess, but seems like the Stanleys are generally worth a little more than the Winchesters for some reason, which I don't think it was always that way, but you get into collecting, things change, so. Anyway, then from the number 4, you went to a number 5. Yeah, right there. And it kind of a little longer, of course, and it had a different purpose. The first 3 I showed you are all called smoothing planes. This one is, they call it a jack plane or a foreplane or whatever, but its purpose was generally to start, well, of course, first we'll tell you that a lot of the lumber that people worked with in those days was called rough cut lumber. It came right off the mill. It wasn't planed, of course. It wasn't sized. It wasn't planed. So these guys, they had to work it down to the size they needed. And this would be where they'd start it. They'd use this to remove larger amounts of material and get it down close to where they wanted it, and then take over with a smoothing plane to get the final finish on it. And then they came, this one here, again, another make. This was a keen cutter. It's a K5.5. It's a little wider than the 5. And this is also made by Stanley, but for keen cutter. You see it up on the iron up there. Another corrugated bottom. This one here made between 1910 and 1918. And then the oldest plane I got, which is another number 5, and it doesn't say anything about Bailey on it because this was before Bailey. This was made between 1891 and 1892. So you can see a few differences. The handle's shaped a little different. The logo is up here, the front knob, and some of them is taller and lower. So anyway, and then we're talking about 1906, like this is another plane from made between 1902 and 1907, and it's just something I've hung on to for a long time. The thing about these planes, they're all made out of cast iron, and if you happen to drop one on the cement floor or on some solid surface, you can very likely break it. And this plane right here was, and you can't see it very well, but on the inside, somebody dropped it on the floor and broke this plane right in half right here at this point, right here. But, being that a dollar was a dollar in those days, they took it to somebody, and I don't know if you can see it, but they actually made plates to go on the outside of this plane on both sides, and they drilled and tapped it. This one I think has 18 different screws countersunk and set in, and this one on this side didn't have quite as many, like 16 or something. But to save this plane, that's what they did. I guess I can't imagine that the cost of having somebody do this would not have exceeded the cost of the plane, but of course, of a new plane. But of course, in those days, people were a little more frugal, and maybe it didn't cost the guy that much to get it fixed up. But I've always kept this. I sold the parts off, or I used the parts off it, I should say, for something else. But I always just think it's a great conversation piece. And let's see, what we got. I'll explain a little bit about condition. If you thought you were going to go buy a plane or something, you know, this is a nice plane. This number 5 is a nice plane. It was in very good condition. All I really had to do is clean it up. And like I said, this was between 1933 and 1941, and number 5. And it would be a good plane because what they say is it probably has about 95% of its original finish on it. You know, it's just got a little chip. And the finish on these they called Japanning, and it wasn't a paint basically. It actually has some type of a asphalt product in it, and it was kind of thick and heavy, and it was when this was made, the finish was a little more flexible basically. But of course, the older they get. So anyway, this would be a good plane for if a collector was looking for, you know, a plane to add to his collection. This would be a pretty good example, you know, except for one fact. Down here, somebody decided they needed to drill a hole to hang it on a pegboard hook or something up on their above their bench or something. Well, that pretty much takes it away from any collector would want, anything any collector would want. They don't want anything modified, drilled, anything like that. So it's just a good user plane, you'd call it, and it will get used that way. So anyway, that's a lot of the planes I own. Have a lot of issues. The ones I keep, like this plane, if you see this area right here, that's not supposed to be like that, but I made it match on both sides. Somebody dropped this plane. They should have came across and down, you know, on both sides. And somebody dropped it, broke one corner off. So I ground it down to make it look good on both sides. And I got another one that's kind of, yeah, I did the same thing. This really old one here, and this one, I did the same thing on the front. They broke it. So those are things you got to look for. And if you're looking for planes, you know, don't make sure you're not getting one that's got some real heavy pitting in. They're all over. You know, people have them. They got wet and they'll have real deep pits. There's just nothing you can do with that except maybe use the parts off it. You always want to look at the mouth on these planes where the iron comes through, because that's where lots of times cracks will show up, and if it's got a crack, avoid paying much for it. But of course, you can use if the handle and the iron and the knob are good. Well, you know, it's probably okay if you don't pay too much for it. It's probably okay, and you can use the parts. You know, so anyway, I'm gonna get a bonnet. So when I'm going to tear a plane apart, I'm going to stick everything in a box, keep everything together, rather than lay it here and lay it there. We'll take the tag off this, put her in the box too, so we know what we got. Oh, and might as well tell you this too while we're at it. The reason I know what things are is because I have this book, and it's one of the most comprehensive books ever written on Stanley tools. You know, it covers everything, pretty much covers everything they ever made from the day they opened the doors. So it's got everything in it, from spoke shaves to rulers to planes to you name it, it's in here. So it's kind of an expensive book. I've had it for quite a few years. They've got values in there, but the values are really outdated because at one time these were worth a whole lot more than they are today. So anyway, we'll start. We'll go back to this one. We're going to start taking this apart. Usually what I'll do, make sure if you're going to take one of these apart, you get a screwdriver that fits the slot properly, because if you got something that's tight, you know, there's no better way to screw it up than by having too small of a screwdriver. This is called the front knob, and like I was telling, this is a Type 18 from 1946 and 1947, just after the war. And at that time, the wood was painted black on these. The front knob and the rear tote here, the rear handle, were painted black. This one definitely has a crack in it, so I've got some extra ones around. I'll probably put a different one on it because, you know, you don't want to crack. So that's the front knob, front handle, front tote, whatever they want to call it. This is called the cap iron. And this little lever here, you know, as you'll see, lifts up, and then you're able to remove that. And it serves the purpose of holding the cutter and the chip breaker in. So you take that, put that over there. This is what they call the chip breaker, and it serves a couple purposes, which is one is to keep that plain iron stiff and inflexible. And so it's just held in there with a screw, and you take the screw out, and you put your chip breaker over here. And the iron, well, you got to look the iron over. Well, it don't look too bad, you know. It don't look too good probably, but it's not bad. It'll clean up fairly good. You're not going to get all everything on it, but then the cutting edge doesn't look too bad. So with hand planes like this, you know, generally, like if you're looking at a chisel, you know, you would use a chisel like this, you know, but in a hand plane, it goes like this. The bevel goes down instead of up, and that's how that works. So we'll put that over there, and then I think we can probably get at the rear tote here. They call it rear tote, rear handle, whatever you want to call it. Some call it one, some call it the other. It's got a screw up front, up in the front here I just took out. And then it has the screw back here. Feels like this shaft that holds this on is bent a little bit somehow or another. So anyway, it comes out like that. It's like that. Goes down through. These planes after the war, they used brass again. Like this was built right after the war. The war planes, they call them, they had steel fixtures like that. No brass. Everything went to the war effort. Then we come down to the frog. I call it a frog, I guess, because it must look like a frog to somebody. I'm not sure. Held in here with a couple of screws. And of course, that is where your iron rested against the frog. And this frog is in this later plane like this. Some of the earlier planes, they were not adjustable. But in a plane like this, you loosen these two screws, and then there's a screw in the back. You can get in here and you turn it and move. You can move this frog in and out so that some people like their cutting iron a little further forward in the mouth, and some people like it. And I guess it depends on the purpose a little bit of what you're doing with it. So anyway, so you can take that right out. Take the two screws, the frog. This little deal here goes on that yoke there. This is called the adjustment knob. This will moves this thing, which in turn, that chip breaker would set on that like that. So you turn this in or out, and you can move your iron in and out. You know, further into the out, sticking further out of the body, or you know, adjust your depth of cut basically. So that's what that part does. This, on the other hand, this is called the lateral adjustment. You can move this if you are getting your plane set up. You'd have it on there, and you'd sight down. You could sight down it and see where the plane is, and sometimes you'll see the iron is sticking through the body, and it looks a little askew. Well, you're able to actually, that'll be in there. It'll turn that iron like that, you know. So that's what that's for. So anyway, there's the frog. And then we're down to the, I don't know, this will come out. Yeah, this is loose. Last time these will be really set up. This is just the frog adjustment screw. I always take these things right down to their bare essence, and then I will start cleaning on them, because you can see it's dirty. It's been sitting someplace. This plane, you know, there's so much of the finish is gone from it that I will probably take it out, put some stripper on this, and remove all the finish. Paint it with a primer, a heavy solid primer, and then we paint it with an enamel paint. And they look pretty good when you're done with them. They don't look like the original finish, but yeah, they aren't too bad. So anyway, when I get that done, I'll bring it back, and we'll continue this video, and I can show you a little bit how it works and how I sharpen the irons and all that stuff. So if you, another thing, if you really want to get in and see how these hand planes are used, I would recommend that you go to, on YouTube, there's a gentleman called Paul Sellers, who is, you know, like a master craftsman, and he uses hand tools and planes, and it's pretty interesting to watch him. He's got one video where he has several episodes where he builds a workbench, you know, so it's kind of I like to watch him anyway. But, yeah, it's kind of long, but it gives you some really good ideas of how these tools were used. So anyway, with that, we'll see you later here.